एक शब्द सुनकर खुशियां बरसे।
एक यस आपकी जिंदगी बदल देता है। आइए यस बैंक में, जहां हम समझते हैं यस का महत्व। यस बैंक, से यस टू ग्रोथ।
एक यस।
डिओड्रेंट है या परफ्यूम? पहली बार परफ्यूम जैसा मजा डिओड्रेंट में। 18+ औरों से अलग।
करोड़ों दिनों से उम्र भर नाता निभाते हैं। Unbreaker, world's #1 sockets, bolts and nuts. Deepak Fasteners Limited.
Life insurance solutions. From the bank you trust.
My Tag Heuer watch. Let me tell you a fascinating story. 150 years ago in a workshop in Switzerland, a perfect watch was born. Time passed, tools changed, year after year. Tag Heuer watchmakers have pioneered precision. Tag Heuer watches became a legend, wanted by movie stars and kings. I'm Shah Rukh Khan, and I'm proud to be part of Tag Heuer's legend. History begins every morning.
You spent the last decade, and if I'm to recall 2000 and all the conversations you had with us then, building what you keep calling a federal structure of companies, right? With Mahindra and Mahindra being the the mothership, yes, the mothership. That was the work of the last decade. You did that successfully. You unlocked value in several group companies, took them to market. What is the path this decade? And no, don't tell me just to strengthen and build on that structure. What are you hoping will shape sort of the group structure over the course of the next 10 years?
What's happened in a federal structure is that you get much more empowerment eventually when you succeed, because you list your companies. You have very strong boards. So suddenly at that point in time, the locus standi of somebody at the core, at the center, the corporate center, is dramatically reduced from a formal point of view, because you have all these companies which are now listed, Tech Mahindra, Club Mahindra and the others. So the question, the next challenge is, in the journey of a federal structure, what are the soft things you do to provide that little extra, that 1 + 1 = 3? And that's where we go back to what we were discussing partially last year, and that is about finding something that motivates people. And ironically, that goes back to your very first question about trust. So if you can actually tell people out there, both your internal people and the external people, that we're going to build a corporation and a federation of companies which is based on trust internally, and provide the consumer to regain his or her trust in companies, I think that's a business model. That's not about CSR, that's not about doing good, that's not about being a saint, that's about finding a very strong positioning which allows you to get traction at a time when the world is going to grow again and become more global. So that's really a challenge. You might say this is soft, fuzzy stuff. Isn't the soft, fuzzy stuff always more difficult? Fuzzy stuff, Isn't it more difficult? It's very easy to do spreadsheets and to say, here's the market segment, this is the growth, and I'm going to get X share of it. But trying to find something intangible that will move people to move mountains, much tougher. So that's enough of a challenge for me. Thank you very much.
Okay, in the last 10 years, you went from building sort of SUVs to now you have an airplane company. You're in boats as well. A variety of diversifications that I think was characterized, or at least the period of boom that we had was characterized by several Indian groups, wanting to diversify. Is that going to be the continuing trend at Mahindra? Have you got other businesses identified that you're hoping to sort of, get a foot in the door with? Or will this be 5 or 10 years of consolidation, maybe even pruning of some businesses based on how they develop and grow?
Well, I always get the odd wry comment on, Twitter or Facebook, telling me about, so when are you getting into cycles and sometimes to monocycles, you haven't completed your journey.
I hope you're not paying attention to all of that, no?
I always listen to people, but the question is, it's not about finding more. I'm sorry to use a cliche again, but we've built an ecosystem, which I think is remarkably powerful. And I've talked ad nauseum to various media about the logic of that, about the logic of building what I call a very large engine with a number of pistons and a very strong crankshaft as a result. Now the time comes to prove that as well. You are very generous in saying that the federation idea, to some extent at least, we've had success. I have to prove
the
that
market shows it. I mean,
I have to prove success here. I have to prove that we can actually build global scale in the automotive business while at the same time maintaining nimbleness and agility in each of our verticals which are targeted at particular industries, and yet garnering scale across the entire mobility ecosystem. So that's a tough job as well, and I think you can call it consolidation if you like. To me, it's building scale in each of them, building scale both vertically and horizontally. That's the task.
Let's say in a year or 2 or maybe 3, how much of your income will come from your global operations and how much will be focused on the Indian market? I'm just curious to understand what the composition of this will likely be.
I've always been very disappointing to people who ask me these questions about how many times do you want to grow and how much.
I'm more interested in the exposure. How much of your business will be global facing? How much of it will be India facing?
If you asked me a year ago, before we were successful in our bid for Sangyong, I would have given you a different answer. So there is a lot of inorganic growth that occurs already, and you cannot sit here and say this is what I expect. All of a sudden, this is a company with a potential top line of 2 billion. Could I have predicted that a year ago, that we would grow by 2 billion globally in the automotive business? No.
But it must have been part of your longer term strategy. So I'm curious to know,
opportunism.
You all do these annual meetings. Have you drawn out, outside of what you've done with the brand positioning, have you drawn out maybe a roadmap for the next 10 years that you can talk to us about?
Inorganic is very, very opportunistic. And we have very specific targets because we are a niche player. So you have to find a player who's in niche areas like you. So it's very difficult to say this is where. I can't give you an answer about that. All I say to our people is you have to have a strategy to gain share. You have to identify markets you want to be in, identify options which are organic, inorganic, and then you really have to go hell bent for leather at them. And I'm not going to be sitting there saying do this. I give broad guidelines like, can we aim for 10x growth? Now, is that a target? That's an impossible target. But that's my job, to give impossible targets. That's not something I would tell analysts or investors is my next quarter's target.
Yes.
Again, soft and fuzzy.
But you just have, through this interview.
No,
so
the 10x has been out for a very long time, that it's part of, and RISE is an enabler for people to think bigger. But if analysts talk to me and say, that does that mean you'll be 10x in your next quarter? I say, of course not. But the question is, think of a group.
So you've given me absolutely no idea of whether there is likely to be any change in the group structure over the course of the next few years.
I've been successful in this
Yes,
interview.
absolutely. in sort of ensuring that you don't give. I'm just curious, is it because you don't have anything planned, or is it that you don't want to share it?
What do you believe? Because
the latter. I wouldn't want to think that you didn't have anything planned, right?
Let me put it this way. As I said, I would like to only come clean about our aspirations, about growth which is very aspirational, and setting in place a structure, enablers which are both financial and people to meet those aspirations. As far as that's concerned, the rest of the business.
Mr. that's what you tell me every year. That part of your job profile doesn't change, does it?
Give me good marks for consistency.
All right. Okay. Final question, and I'll let you go. I know you have a series of interviews to do. The top 3 concerns that you have on your list this year, things that you're going to constantly be checking on to ensure that your business has overcome them.
The first is internal. It's not, I don't always look outside to find something to keep me awake. It's always internal, and that is, can we actually make this new philosophy, this new core purpose, something that really drives people to work every day?
This is Mahindra Rise.
Is it going to degenerate into simply being an advertising tagline, or is it going to be transformational? I will be monitoring that very closely and moving personally to try and fill gaps if we find them. That's certainly number one as far as I'm concerned. The second one will be to make sure that the architecture of the group that we have right now and the financial resources which accompany that architecture enable very, very aspirational goals. So if I tell people 10x, then I have to have an architecture which enables them to do that. And the third one is the only external one, which we've talked about, which is I really believe that India has a chance to grow phenomenally and to become the fastest growing economy in the world. If certainly, I'm not talking about the largest, but the fastest growing. And I believe that all of us, both in the private sector and the government, have a promise to fulfill.
But not one person in business, with the exception of the letter that went out last week, which had 15 business leaders sign off on it, has stood up and spoken about the current government situation at all. In fact, most people will hedge their comments, try to be politically correct and not want to comment at all.
Well, as you said, there was a letter that's remarkable. I don't know whether whether that's been greeted by skepticism in your community or not. But
well, none of those 15
gentlemen is part of that.
Yes, I know, and all of them refused to comment on the letter. So I thought that was interesting. You write an open letter and you don't comment on it.
Yeah. I'll pass the message on.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mahindra. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Every quarter, India Inc.'s biggest companies break their earnings first on CNBC TV 18.
There is ample liquidity in the domestic market.
The year, I would say,
India's most respected earnings show, Boardroom, brings you the numbers as it happens.
1.5% on the profits.
Live coverage, exclusive interviews, in-depth analysis that is accurate and insightful. No wonder India only trusts Boardroom. Boardroom presented by Suntech Realty Limited.